This history was made in partnership with The Great Gatsby on Broadway. The Great Gatsby's been no stranger to the stage and screen.
Gatsby? What Gatsby?
Since the original novel flopped in 1925, the story of blinking green lights, mysterious millionaires, doomed love, and huge parties has attracted interpretation after interpretation. In 1926, playwright Owen Davis wrote a play version that was a huge smash on Broadway. That same year, Paramount Pictures released a silent film version that author F. Scott Fitzgerald's wife Zelda described as rotten and awful and terrible, and we left. Surprisingly, through all the different incarnations, The Great Gatsby had never been a musical. The closest it came was an opera in 2000. But producer Chun-Soo Shin wanted to change that, as he and his creative team raced to repeat the past. Only this time, as a big-budget musical. This is the story of expectations and frustrations, of friendships and competitions, but above all else, it's a story of why we keep coming back to the great American novel. This is the story of The Great Gatsby, the musical. Producer Chun-Soo Shin might have loved The Great Gatsby, but many referred to him as Don Quixote. As Korea Jungang Daily put it, he was a man with dreams and visions far ahead of his time. From his first experience on Broadway as an associate producer on The Story of My Life, a musical that ran for 5 official performances, Shin's work only got bolder, co-producing shows like Chaplin, Jekyll and Hyde, Rocky, and Dr. Zhivago, none of which performed particularly well. But in South Korea, Shin was a superstar, and he was ready for his next hit, The Great Gatsby musical. But first, he needed a composer.
I was working in Korea, in Seoul, working on a couple of different musicals for a man named Chun-Soo Shin, and he took me to lunch at the Intercontinental Hotel. We sat in the lobby bar, and he said, The Great Gatsby is my favorite book, and I want to make a musical of it. And my immediate response was, we're not allowed to. And he said, we are allowed to. It's going to be in the public domain in a year.
It's a new year, which means the copyright on a slew of new intellectual property has hit its 95-year expiration date, so
The Great Gatsby has entered the public domain.
If, say, the Muppets wanted to do an adaptation of The Great Gatsby, they can, just like they did with The Christmas Carol.
When the clock struck midnight on January 1st, 2021, 95 years of copyright protection expired, and The Great Gatsby entered the public domain. Suddenly, the Fitzgerald estate could no longer control who could or couldn't tell the story. Much like with Steamboat Willie and Winnie the Pooh, people wasted little time adding their own unique twist on the classic story, including a version where Gatsby is a vampire, and another where Nick has scoliosis. Shin counted down the days to add his own musical twist and stage it in South Korea.
I said, that's a fantastically interesting idea. I want to think about that, and I would really want to think about who the collaborators would be, because it's such a uniquely American story about class. And he said, that sounds great. Let me know who you want to work with. And then I left.
Nathan Tyson, who is my husband, is a lyricist, and he worked with Jason Howland on a show called Paradise Square.
During Paradise Square, when we were doing the out-of-town production, Nathan's wife and family came out to stay for a while.
And after the performances, Jason would come over for a nightcap and to talk about what was going on in the show. And the show is sort of famously tumultuous, and so there was a lot to talk about. And a lot of times the three of us would end up just chatting about what they were working on. And
it seemed like the three of us really had a common sense of how storytelling works.
and he pitched me and Nathan. So we started working on it because of that.
Playwright Kate Kerrigan made a name for herself by writing and producing indie theater with her collaborator Brie Loudermilk, and worked on shows ranging from small cabarets to 50-person house parties, and eventually a West End musical. But Gatsby promised to be the biggest musical she'd ever worked on. To get started, the team wrote a synopsis detailing their vision for the Great Gatsby musical, one that challenged the role of the original unreliable narrator, Nick Carraway.
Having a narrator on stage is a challenge, and trying to minimize the amount of time that you're in one person's perspective, I think is a really valuable thing in a musical, because it limits your ability to understand the other people on stage.
The team also believed that expanding the story beyond Nick's perspective gave room to flesh out the women in the story.
Being able to give these female characters a specific, different kind of depth and more of a complexity about their relationship to marriage was something that really funneled through all of the writing that I was doing on it in the beginning.
The pitch was 4 pages long, but boiled down to one core sentence written by Kerrigan. Their Great Gatsby was a great tragedy disguised as a great party.
What we kept playing around with as we were working on this was, how long can we keep the musical comedy going? How far into the second act can we make it a musical comedy and follow the rules of musical comedy before it goes crashing down into something else?
The team submitted their idea in January of 2020. And then the world changed.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know.
South Korea has confirmed its first case of the mysterious coronavirus.
Starting tonight, the lights will go out on Broadway. The Great White Way told to shut down, along with performances at Carnegie Hall and Lincoln Center.
And this will pass. This will pass through, and we're going to be even stronger for it.
Once the world entered lockdown, any work on the Great Gatsby musical and in-person theater ground to a halt. Needing some sort of an outlet for their creativity and a way to make income, Howland, Tyson, and Kerrigan shifted their attention towards a new project.
If no one is coming to the theater anymore, well, then we have no choice but to bring theater into their homes.
The first thing we wrote together was a killer party, which was a streaming thing we did during COVID because everybody was stuck at home. And so that gave us an opportunity to sort of work together for the first time while beginning to develop this project.
In the span of just a few weeks, the team miraculously wrote a full-length 90-minute musical. Upon the virtual musical's release, Jesse Green, the infamous head theater critic of the New York Times, gave the show an uncharacteristically positive review, calling it cheerful and slapdash and silly enough to compensate for an almost total lack of coherence. Green praised Howland's peppy synth-pop score and the enthusiasm of A Killer Party's director, Mark Bruni. Howland and Bruni originally worked together on Beautiful, the Carole King musical, in 2014. And in a case of chicken or the egg, the Great Gatsby musical found their director.
They had written about 4 songs and a treatment, and they sent that to me and said, "What do you think?" And I heard those 4 songs and went, there's something really exciting here. This is an incredible challenge to take on this great American novel in great American musical form.
With cases of COVID rising, the only way the team could safely communicate was through computer screens. Easy to do for a completely online musical, but a little bit more challenging for one meant to be an on-stage extravaganza. Using Zoom and calling in from 3 different locations, the team brainstormed and experimented for months. Even once vaccines became more easily available, international travel was still restricted.
At that point, the show was direct to South Korea. It's a big book over there. But because it was in the middle of the pandemic, we could never go over there. We could never develop it over there. So we just started doing stages of development here.
And then we did a table reading for the first time. And it was just in New York. And we had a bunch of actors read the roles, and I played all of the demos.
The actors didn't even learn the music. It was just about reading through the script and having Jason play the songs.
Which is a terrible way to present material because nobody's actually singing, so you're just waiting for the song to be over.
The Paper Mill Playhouse came to see a step of the project and said that they wanted to do it. And we talked to Mr. Shin and said, it'd be so much easier for us before it gets translated, if we could kind of figure out how the show works and how it moves and, then bring it to South Korea. And he said, yes.
On March 27th, 2023, just 3 years after their initial pitch, the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey announced The Great Gatsby would receive its world premiere that October. But producer Chun-Soo Shin wasn't the only one with the idea to turn The Great Gatsby into a musical. Soon, the show came face to face with a machine. In 2013, director Baz Luhrmann put his own spin on The Great Gatsby, with a movie starring Leo DiCaprio. Not only did this spawn one of history's greatest gifts, but a soundtrack to match. Between tracks filled with electronic swing and seductive hip-hop, a song by Florence Welch of the band Florence and the Machine called Over the Love relished in the melancholy imagery of Fitzgerald's book. As she put it in an interview with Rolling Stone, the book has haunted me for a large part of my life. On February 23rd, 2023, the American Repertory Theater, or ART, in Boston announced a Gatsby musical of their own. Simply titled Gatsby, the show promised a much heavier tone, with direction by Hadestown director Rachel Chafkin and music by Florence Welch of the band Florence and the Machine. Somehow, there were 2 Gatsby musicals. A similar occurrence took place when the 1928 poem The Wild Party entered the public domain. This led to 2 The Wild Party musicals opening in New York in 2000. One opened on Broadway with a dark and heavy tone, and the other opened off-Broadway with a much lighter and brassier one. 20 years later, the past repeated itself. The curiosity between the 2 Gatsbys started to grow, a feeling only amplified once Paper Mill announced their cast.
Dude, this is not a dream. I am here inside the cream of cheese. Yes, it's Jeremy Jordan.
The star of Paper Mill to Broadway musicals like Newsies, Jeremy Jordan, also appeared in A Killer Party.
And so when I found out that Jason was writing this musical, I was like, get me on.
Jordan went from cream cheese to cream of the crop when he jumped into the role of Jay Gatsby for a New York workshop in December 2022. A party that unfortunately did not keep roaring on.
Didn't get to finish it because I got COVID in the middle of it. I was like, well, that's that. But then they asked me to come back for Paper Mill. So there you go.
I mean, who else do you want as Gatsby? There's a suaveness and a debonair quality, and I just look at him and go, like, is this it? Or is he kidding?
With the role of Gatsby filled, the team just needed to find his green light. Actress Eva Noblezada was burnt out. On July 10th, 2023, the actress announced plans to leave the Rachel Chafkin-directed musical Hadestown, where she spent 5 years as the lead character Eurydice. As she stated in a Playbill article 2 weeks later, the relentless 8-show-a-week schedule was taking a toll, and it was time for her to realign with what she wanted to reimagine for herself in her life. The same day the interview was published, another article announced her newest role. She would become the first actor of Filipina and Mexican heritage to play Daisy in the musical version of The Great Gatsby. And she'd do it at the Paper Mill Playhouse.
She reached out to us and said, we'd love to have a work session. And it was one of those moments where We all sat there watching this, and she did 2 songs and 3 scenes, I think. And we just watched this and went, well, no one else can do this.
For a hot second.
Like, unbelievable.
You're like, should we just stop her at the elevator?
Can we stop her at the elevator and just tell her?
Can we just tell her she got it?
Tell her now?
I write down OTW on my sheet, which is off to wardrobe. It's just like, done. Of course.
Daisy Buchanan is a nightmare dressed like a daydream. At least, that's what the book's narrator, Nick Carraway, wants us to think. But Kate Kerrigan viewed her as more than a siren with a voice full of money.
If you think about her just as a human being and where she is in 1922 and what her life is like and what her options are and what her options probably were when it came to getting married, it's a different experience, and you have the opportunity to examine that.
There's a lot about her that's very complex, that's very unlikable. So I'm really excited about that because she's a very beautiful character. It doesn't make her a likable character, so to me. So I'm excited about that complexity there.
Another thing that always intrigued the creative team was how relevant the story was to modern times. The divide between the haves and have-nots was growing. The world was coming out of a global pandemic with the Spanish flu, technology was progressing at a pace nobody felt they could keep up with, and racial tensions continued to grow.
When I first read the book, some of the tropes and some of the themes and some of the language turned me off completely. The racism, simple as that. Like, if I can't find myself or my people in a story, sometimes it's very hard for me to relate. And what I like to say is, we're making the musical a little more colorful than the book would have been. And it's very important to me to have faces and bodies and lifestyles on the stage that might not have been talked about maybe 100 years in the book.
The relevance to today also found its way into the music.
So much of the story of what happened in that novel feels exactly like what's happening right now. So I really wanted to figure out a way to bring modern production and the kind of songwriting that I like to do and mash that up with a 1920s approach to horn writing and early jazz.
During his work on Beautiful, the Carole King musical, Carole King herself asked Howland what he planned to do with her music. He responded by saying, "I'm going to make the audience feel the way they did when they heard your songs for the first time." He planned to do the same thing with The Great Gatsby. On September 28th, 2023, the cast and crew assembled at the New 42 Studios in New York to start rehearsals for Paper Mill. Unlike the novel, where it takes 60 pages to finally meet Gatsby, the musical opened with Gatsby himself.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm done with the Spanish flu. It's 1922, come out of your closet.
Making changes to The Great Gatsby wasn't new. As pointed out by Fitzgerald scholars James L.W. West and Anne Margaret Daniel. In Owen Davis's 1926 Broadway play, Nick Carraway was also no longer the narrator. There was no trip through the Valley of the Ashes, no billboard with the painted eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckelberg, and Gatsby didn't even display his shirts. The thing is, nobody really knew what The Great Gatsby was in 1926, let alone cared enough to have opinions on any changes. The creative team of The Great Gatsby musical in 2023 didn't have this same luxury. As the rehearsal clips found their way online, it became clear that everyone had an opinion. Some were upset that Gatsby appeared so early in the show. Others were just thrilled to see Jeremy Jordan again. Some called out the lack of jazz music. Others called it jazzy. Despite the split response, everyone pretty much agreed on two things. The choreography ate, and the mask bit was tasteless. Regardless of whether people thought the show was going to be a hit or a flop, everybody was talking about it. Just 1 week after the rehearsal footage went live, the show sold out its entire month-long run at Paper Mill. Then, on October 22nd, 2023, The Great Gatsby musical's world premiere night finally arrived. Without the mask bit. The show was a pretty big departure from the source material. Exactly as they pitched it in their first draft, the story was told without Nick's narration. The The lead character of this version of The Great Gatsby was Gatsby himself. But that's not to say Nick, played by Noah Ricketts, didn't have anything to do in the story. Much like Owen Davis's play version in 1926, the Paper Mill Gatsby took their own twists, including Nick and Jordan Baker getting engaged, Wilson working in cahoots with the mobster Meyer Wolfsheim, and a very different death for a now pregnant Myrtle. It wasn't as drastic as in 1926, where Myrtle is accidentally killed by Wilson in a shootout at Gatsby's mansion, but it was still pretty different from the book. Given the changes, many on the Gatsby team were nervous about what the critics would think. But for the most part, the reactions from the press were pretty mild. The most biting reviews came from TikTok.
So I know the Great Gatsby musical has been getting some hate on this app.
The opening number, Roaring On, is the big thing everyone's talking about because Gatsby's in it right away, which obviously he's supposed to be shrouded in a bit of mystery. He literally starts the show.
Yeah, why they did that, because, like, you got Jeremy Jordan, you're gonna make him sing. But, like, it really makes you wonder, like, what was the direction here, you know?
Here's what I would do in order to make your show successful. I would replace your music and book writers with Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine. I think she's a wonderful, wonderful songwriter.
That being said, the fans who loved the show really loved the show.
I went to the first preview of Great Gatsby at Paper Mill Playhouse, and y'all, I loved it.
If you like Phantom of the Opera and Beauty and the Beast, you'll love this show.
4 + 4 = 8. They chewed, devoured.
It was phenomenal. It was this like huge spectacle.
Just got out of the show, and I don't care what anybody says. That was fantastic, and I would not be surprised that it goes to Broadway.
By the time the Paper Mill run ended on November 12th, 2023, rumors swirled backstage. The sellout success, star-studded cast, and well-known title pretty much spelled out the inevitable.
Regardless of how this all plays out, with what's that? When? Sure. Okay, just put it out. When?
That December, any rumors behind the scenes were confirmed. Korea would have to wait just a little bit longer. First, they needed to go to Broadway. In June of 2023, Chun-Soo Shin opened his 8th Broadway show as a co-producer, the Britney Spears jukebox musical Once Upon a One More Time. It closed 42 performances later. Shin decided it was finally time to take control of his own fate. As The Great Gatsby prepared to make the jump to Broadway, it did so with Shin as the show's only lead producer. The first Korean in Broadway history to do so, as reported by the Korea Times. In that same article, Shin went on to say, "This time I wanted to ensure the show's direction was solely mine." This bold choice propelled him into a position of immense pressure and responsibility. Whether the show was a hit or a flop, it all would come back to him. As Shin set out to find investors, the creative team got to work on an even bigger task: fixing the musical. After watching the show every night at Paper Mill, the creative team generated a hit list of all the moments they wanted to tweak in its next iteration.
We didn't want the expectations to be too terribly high coming out of Paper Mill. We wanted to have a game plan for how to surprise the audience when we got to Broadway.
Looking back, Kerrigan realized that cutting Nick's narration in favor of introducing Gatsby right off the bat worked to an extent, but it also hurt the larger themes of the story. She saw that The Great Gatsby wasn't just about Gatsby. It was about everyone's perspective of him, and most importantly, it was a story about class, something that didn't come across at Paper Mill for one big reason. They didn't have Nick Carraway as an observer.
We were trying to start with the character who actually wants something, and Gatsby is the one who has the big dream and has something to sing about. There was a feeling that perhaps seeing him pull the strings and activate the story might be a way to start the show. I think we found out after Paper Mill that there's something inherent in this material about the mystery of Gatsby, and prolonging his entrance was an important element in terms of getting us on board with Nick's journey.
Keeping that in mind, the team agreed on their solution. They needed to rewrite the entire first 20 minutes, and they only had a month to do so. In an extreme case of Murder Your Darlings, the creative team spent countless hours rewriting and restructuring everything. They wrote a new second scene to make the characters appear more careless. They replaced a song for Daisy, added new lines to build up to the mystery of Gatsby, and they completely rewrote the spectacle-filled number called New Money into an 8-minute odyssey through the mansion, building the anticipation for the big reveal of Jay Gatsby. A reveal the team felt was made more impactful by a change to the show's opening. The musical now started with Nick Carraway front and center, and Gatsby didn't appear until much later. As the show barreled forward, the team doubled down on making more changes.
Literally, until pencils down, we are doing all the tweaks, and we know the cast hates us, but they'll love us in the long run.
Most of my stuff from Paper Mill to Broadway has not changed significantly enough to like totally derail my whole process. So I feel like it's been a very smooth leap from Paper Mill to Broadway for me.
In rehearsals every day, stuff changes every day. So we have to write down all those changes and change them and backspace it in our computer.
And delete everything.
And write in new changes. So we're very excited for the show to become frozen.
The Great Gatsby was one of 21 new musicals racing to open on or before April 25th. The reason? They needed to be eligible for the 77th annual Tony Awards. As Gatsby and American Myth started selling tickets for their performances in Boston, The Great Gatsby on Broadway prepared for their first previews. Meanwhile, the remaining musicals all started to open. Each day churned out a new opening night, and a new unpredictable response from critics. Shows many thought would be critical hits received poor reviews. On the other hand, shows that some people overlooked turned into critics' picks. Going into Broadway, many on the Gatsby team acknowledged the show might not be a critical darling. But it wasn't meant to be. They didn't write it for the critics. They wrote it to transport audiences into a world of decadence. To bring this opulence to life, producer Chun-Soo Shin managed to raise an enormous $25 million, primarily from Korean investment partners, many of whom had never been given the chance to invest in a Broadway show before. Though already impressive at Paper Mill, the increased budget meant scenic designer Paul Tate-Dupuis III and lighting designer Corey Paddock could create a show beyond even Gatsby's wildest dreams.
Actually, the hardest part of this process was explaining to everybody that actually had to make this a reality. Here's how it works out of my brain. And there is an entire choreographed show backstage of non-actors.
The show being in the Broadway Theater, the second largest theater on Broadway, presented a huge opportunity for the design team, literally giving them enough room to store scenery for more than 50 set pieces. East Egg mansions floated in, illuminated by a faint green light. A life-size cottage flew away to reveal an Art Nouveau bedroom. Towering bookshelves gave way to a giant T.J. Eckleburg billboard, a set piece the team continued to work on just days before opening.
It is all hand painted. Like if you take it off, it is incredible how these painters painted it. A last note that we had was we just wanted to bring that Dr. T.J. Eckleburg closer in view for everybody, just for storytelling, because Wilson's constantly referring to him as Doc, and for those that aren't as familiar with the novel, it just helps sort of say, that's the doctor.
As if the giant sets weren't enough, the team leaned even harder into the spectacle by flooding the stage with everything from fireworks to literal automobiles.
Once the car is driving on stage, it is self-powered. It is electric, basically a golf cart chassis. and the actors have full control. A lot of people ask, is there a track? I heard someone ask, I wonder if there's magnets, like a Disney ride. That's not, nope. They're driving it. But what's fun is there is actually a remote emergency stop that is controlled from the wings. So if for any reason the actors lose control of it or the car is going somewhere where it's not, we're going to have that never. We will never need it, but we have watched them rehearse it. There's an offstage emergency stop they can also use.
The show also leaned into the brassier, more spectacular elements on their social media pages, particularly highlighting Dominique Kelly's choreography. Going all the way back to their initial pitch, the team knew dance would play a crucial role in the musical. In addition to the key characters and moments, they wanted to have an ensemble referred to only as the Party, a personified mob of 1920s carelessness, where decadence was more valued than human life. With over 30 years of experience, Kelly's approach to the dance was based in both history and heritage.
Basically, my favorite time period of all times is the Harlem Renaissance. That's like my beacon. We're doing a jazz musical, so being that it is a Black art form, I have no choice but to bring everything of my being, of my DNA, the way I move my hips, the way I tap my feet, and really put it forward on the American stage, because jazz music is an American art form. And it's been so wonderful to just be me and put tap in there, put South African boot dance in there, put Lindy in there, put a lot of different dance styles that you would have seen in the 1920s, but you might not have seen in the movie or like heard about in the book.
The dance videos, coupled with the star power of the cast and multiple events geared to woo influencers, all played a hand in exposing the show to new audiences.
Here we have a party, there's a party right here, and then there we have a party, there's a party right there, and then there.
Oh, I mean, everyone's talking about the Great Gatsby.
I've heard the music so good. I've heard some clips on TikTok. Sounds so good.
A lot on TikTok. I think it might not be the best musical ever, but I want to have a good time.
And I also think the press between the two different Gatsbys, you have Great Gatsby, then Gatsby coming, is a huge drive, especially to take how they compare different creatives, different casts, different shows.
Honestly, it seems more like Barbenheimer meets Footloose remakes. One's more upbeat than the other one.
The demand for the social media team to attend influencer events, create content, and flood the feed was intense. But alongside that, post by post, the reach, excitement, and community surrounding the show grew exponentially.
It's always been amazing from the first day ever. There's an expectation, and then there's a meeting of that expectation, and there's an exceeding of the expectations, which is really reflective in the conversations that I've had with audience members that have come to see the show. I'm talking real people, not, industry people or friends. I'm talking the real Broadway lovers out there.
The average time to take a show from idea to Broadway is 10 years. Gatsby did it in 4.
All right, everyone, we're in the soft serve. This is the soft serve night. Thank you, everybody, for a great afternoon. We will gather together again on Thursday and have a great one. It's gonna be good.
On April 25th, 2024, the cast and creative team walked the red carpet for the musical's Broadway opening. The show journeyed through the peak of a global pandemic, intense fan backlash, a big rewrite, cast sicknesses, set malfunctions, a crowded Broadway season, and a severely divisive critical landscape, all just to stand in front of 1,700 people and tell them a story. When the curtain came down, the entire team Ubered to the restaurant Tavern on the Green for the after party. The show ended at 9:07 p.m. The reviews came out 1 hour later. Once again, everybody had an opinion. New York Post critic Johnny Oleksensky compared the over-reliance on spectacle to watching King Kong the Musical in the same theater 6 years prior, stating, "But now, a monkey isn't captive, it's your favorite novel." New York Times critic Laura Collins Hughes noted that the decision to shy away from the book's darker elements in favor of a good time hurt the show. On the other hand, Adam Feldman of Time Out found the show delivered more than any other new musical of the overstuffed Broadway season. And Kobe Castle of Theaterly declared it was modern-day American musical theater at its finest. Out of sight from the rest of the party, the social media and marketing teams assembled. An hour after the reviews came out, The Great Gatsby's social pages posted 3 photos back to back to back. Each one emphasized the same thing, what the team wanted to focus on since the beginning. The Great Gatsby on Broadway was a giant, crowd-pleasing musical. I used to think opening nights were when the creative team experienced their big, "we did it" moment. The big payoff for years of hard work where they reflected on everything that led them to this moment, surrounded by flashing lights, cameras, and celebrities. This isn't the case. Really, it's the week before. Before critics flood the internet with their thoughts, before people start speculating on award nominations, before everyone chimes in on what they think the future of a show will be, before there's just so much noise. The closest you can come to the feeling that a show is done is when the team sits in a quiet theater, watches the crew break down their workspaces, and finally decides to stop making changes.
I'm proud that we still like each other.
Yeah, totally.
after this whole process, and that people are showing up and sitting in the seats and watching what we're up to.
I just thought about, I think we had our first meeting about this over Zoom during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So 4 of us, 4 people in 3 different locations. And now, if you just do a 360 right now and you look at the 150 people that are now working on this show as we speak.
Yeah.
The thing that we've created is really beautiful. It's like the best and worst part about musical theater is that you have to collaborate with other people.
I'm really excited about people who come in with a relationship with the novel. I'm excited to hear what they have to say about it. I'm excited for them to grapple with that and have their opinions, because that's what we do when we care about something. I hope that we give them what they wanted out of The Great Gatsby.
Whether it's a spectacular blockbuster movie, an opera with giant white chairs, or a flashy Broadway musical, every single version is someone else's idea of what The Great Gatsby is about. Every version, besides the show Gats, which read the book word for word, isn't an adaptation though. It's an interpretation. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it, you can love it, you can hate it, but it's their take on it. In his lifetime, F. Scott Fitzgerald published 4 novels, 164 short stories, and 1 very bad play. And yet, 84 years since his death, we only really talk about Gatsby. What is it that keeps pulling us back? On the surface, it looks like a beautiful love story, but underneath, there's something much more complex. It's not a story about characters or plot so much as it is a story about time, a story about longing, a story of wanting something so bad you'll do anything to reach it, a story of dreams and the price we pay to pursue them. We keep coming back to Gatsby because we connect to it. It taps into that desire we have to prove ourselves, to reinvent ourselves, to build our own legacies, to run faster and stretch out our arms farther. As long as we continue to care about The Great Gatsby, its green light will continue its siren call. And so, we beat on. F. Scott Fitzgerald loved theater, but unfortunately, his biggest attempt to achieve his Broadway dream ultimately turned into a nightmare. Click on this video to learn about F. Scott Fitzgerald's wild flop play The Vegetable, and support the channel on Patreon to help us continue making these documentaries.